you is allowed your opinion, and your opinions can't be wrong. That's a plus.
I think he's closest to Warren here.
Miss Zucker, would you happen to have my outline by any chance? I want to read the definition that Hegel has for philosophy. It's kind of relative.
Okay.
Yeah, it's now my book.
Yes.
This is not a facetious question. That's one of the reasons that I'm having a hard time focusing is, I know that, I guess it's important to talk about the context that Hegel's philosophy fits into, but what I would really like to understand is what Hegel's philosophy actually is. What is it saying?
I'll tell you in a second.
And then I think you can make it more about
Isn't this
how it
an
fits.
addition to a book that we're supposed to have read before we do this?
No, it's a preface. It's
But
before
he's
that.
getting into actual theory here.
Yeah.
Like
There was something else that we were supposed to read that he refers to in the...
Oh, the Logica.
Yeah.
No, that's his previous work. I mean,
So will that help us understand what
well, sure, if you read all of somebody's work, you will understand them better than if you just read one
you
piece
won't
of it.
understand them?
That's true.
Hello?
You make them.
Wait, that was like a whole minute ago. You know?
Must be tired. They always do this to me.
They say you can't
Morning, Nathan.
No.
You don't
They
need me
make
today
fun
because
of
you
my
have another
accent
map.
every once in a while.
Well, that's
When
not
I
even
am
things with help.
tired,
Not listening to
I
what I'm saying,
revert
so
to
that's not what
a
I'm saying.
sort of vaguely southern New England / tri-state area.
It's rather insensitive of them.
They always haunt me. I do, because it is so rare.
But particularly because of the guy we saw this morning in the restaurant going, hello, Nathan, how are you? And then knocking over the man's ice water and pretending nothing happened.
All right,
All right, can I say what it is?
now,
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll say what the definition. Well,
What
I think
definition?
some sort of definition for philosophy is.
go get. I'm powerless here. Go on.
All right. Let's see. To comprehend what is. To comprehend what is. Oh, my toy truck. To comprehend what is. This is the task of philosophy. Because what is reason? Whatever happens, every individual is a child of his time.
Good.
So philosophy, too, is its own time apprehended. In thoughts, it is just as absurd to fancy that a philosophy can transcend its contemporary world as if it is to fancy that an individual can overleap his own age, jump over roads. If his theory really, if his theory really goes beyond the world as it is and builds an ideal, one as it ought to be, that world exists indeed, but only in his opinions, an unsubstantial element where anything you please may in fancy be built.
What does that mean? Okay.
Hold on, I'm gonna go on.
No, you can't just keep on going.
With hardly an alteration,
Pretty soon in the period
this
of time.
proverb just quoted would run, what lies between reason and self-conscious. All right, this is key.
All right. Yeah, go on.
What lies between reason as self-conscious mind and reason as an actual world before our eyes? What separates the former from the latter and prevents it from finding satisfaction in the latter is the fetter of some abstraction
I like
or
this
other
one.
which has not been liberated and so transformed into the concept. That is key.
Okay, could we like translate that whole thing to like layman terms for us people?
Or lay woman term.
I know, he does use
Lay person.
His vocabulary is kind of deceiving.
Very enough. Yeah, go on. Oh my gosh, I'm on his case. Go
What
on.
I think is that.
Go on. Sir.
Well, it's like he's talking about the abstract things that Plato was talking about. Read it. Dialectic. Let me see it.
All right, go on.
Dialectic, yeah. Anyway.
What is he talking about? Let's back it up. contradiction with or in keeping with Enlightenment philosophy?
In
keeping with. Well, there you go, dialectic. Thesis and antithesis.
No way.
Generated out of one statement.
I think they have nothing to do with each other. You can't make a statement.
Pardon?
Humanistic age, the whole the Enlightenment,
Would you say Hegel's humanistic though?
and that they were they were looking to improve the human situation by themselves through the environment, and that's why. I mean, they assumed that people were products of the time, and that they could of their environment, so they could change the environment.
Stop.
Except they thought that, Enlightenment thought that we were all the same deep down inside.
And that we, in fact, the whole concept behind
Individualism.
and rational individualism. I thought you were going to go someplace else. Stop.
No,
I thought you were going to go someplace else. And that is that progress, the notion of progress, is picking up the strand from the Enlightenment. All right? However, the locus, the place of that progress is very, very different. Okay? In the Enlightenment, that progress will come through what?
Human resource, the mind.
All right. Now, what if you have, if you're living in a society fraught with injustice, ridiculous institutions, people who go around executing other people for entertainment?
What are we, friends?
That's not long.
Well, in a certain way, I suppose. All right.
Well, wait a minute, people here watch Faces of Death.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Exactly. I mean, unfortunately, yeah, there's a lot involved there. Okay, so let's say you live in that society. Does that mean that you will be incapable of moving beyond it?
No.
No, in fact, the entire concept of enlightenment is that of the individual.
The individual makes the difference. It's the individual's actions that can change.
All right, and
Whatever.
the individual can do what? If this is society,
Does that go back to
Also,
Kant?
idealism can transcend society.
Is that
All right.
But they can change it
Rise of
within the
Hope.
context.
Okay, but first, in fact, they must transcend. That's not so different from
The categorical imperative
the
Philosopher.
it ties in
with the individual setting new precedents?
yes. Yes.
But still,
Yes.
it depends
In
what
that
enlightenment
sense, yes.
person you talk to talking about history, because some of them think that history has nothing to do with anything, and it's actually bad to bother with it. And some think that you can learn from history.
Well, then you must heed history. I mean, Hegel is not just saying you can learn from history. He's saying you are history, and you must heed that. All right? And you must watch history because you are part of that flow, whether you do nothing or whether you do something. All right? It's not so obvious. I mean, we go along. Think about the people in this country who don't vote in elections, right? Who think they can sort of absent themselves and it doesn't really matter. Think of all the little injustices you grumble about but don't do anything. That probably won't ever do anything. I think all the injustices I put up with. You know,
Yeah, but think of the
and
material
I
stuff
think,
invented that
I
could
don't
change
agree with
history.
this, blah, 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 and I'm not going to do anything. And I don't realize that my acquiescence, in fact, is part of history, just as my combating it would be part of history.
Material stuff can also change. One thing that you can also change history with material stuff. I mean, you could change history with a gun. I mean that.
Well, that's there's a discussion involved in that, what you just said, that's quite large, and that is, okay, that during the Enlightenment, that was very much the idea, and it's the idea that we, by and large, are taught through our history courses, which is that the individual can change history. That is what view of history. That requires what vision of history?
Progressive.
Well,
I'm sorry, linear. No.
Well, it's certainly not cyclical.
all right,
but it could be
linear.
linear.
It's linear in a fashion, but it is not linear with history big H. It's because it is that's an individualist view of history that says that individuals, people, can transcend the situation and change history. All right, the whole idea that, for instance, we talk about this a lot. Martin Luther King, all right, created the civil rights movement. Well, you look at the material situation of people of color in this country. You look at what juncture we were in history. And the argument can easily be made that someone would have come along, Martin Luther King or somebody else.
So this is
All
the
right.
idea of the times, and every idea
Right.
having its time, and before the time, forget it. Like, you couldn't have the Copernican theory before a certain time if people weren't ready for it.
Right.
So another guy brings it up later, and people understand.
Now, the way I introduced the Enlightenment as an idea, okay, ought to tell you something about my perspective on this. How did I introduce the Enlightenment as an idea, and Enlightenment philosophers as people of thought? What did I make us do?
Treat them like gods.
What did I make us do?
Look into history surrounding.
I made you study the history. Now, I did that very much on purpose, knowing we were going to do Hegel. I also did that because that's the way I tend to look at things. Now, what does that tell you about my perspective?
You felt that the Enlightenment was an idea whose time had come, and these are the reasons why.
You can't
Reasons
divorce
are to be found in history.
Actually,
Right. In other words,
You are a believer in the theory that philosophies exist because of the current.
yeah, and because of the material conditions allowing their growth. In other words, we see in Plato many ideas that will become part of the Enlightenment, or that will become part of Hegelian thought, that will become, in fact, part of Marxist thought. But as focuses of an ideology and of an idea, all right, and of a way of doing things and thinking about organization and the world and human beings, right, they were not, their time had not come, right?
But then, say in a utopia or whatever, is any progress to be made?
how can there be progress?
There could be
Well, you know what
It's like final stage.
well, you know what a utopia is,
Yeah.
according to
a
Thomas
place
More.
that cannot be
Yeah,
a
hypothetical,
wonderful
yeah.
place.
Yeah.
But I mean, in a social utopia, say a place where, you know, everyone loves his neighbor and everything's good, there's still advances to be made, technological advances, comforts, whatever, but who would bother?
Right, and that's one of the big, I mean, it's one of the, in fact, the big arguments against, you know, Norway and Sweden, is that there isn't as much progress in those countries because people don't need the progress. All right, because they're taken care of. Their material needs are met. So their intellectual lives don't require that they keep on going. I mean, it's one of the arguments whenever people say, oh my God, look at child care in Sweden. Yeah, you know how, you know the alcoholism rate, and you know, blah, blah, blah. Do you understand what I'm saying? That in a situation where people are pretty well taken care of materially, that there isn't, that's the argument.
Philosophy seems to deal with reduction materially, though. It's like philosophy deals with the reduction of material stuff almost. Like progress in philosophy wouldn't
Okay, good.
have anything to do with industrializing.
Good.
That's the more
Yeah,
you
very
satisfy
good.
your mind, the less your body needs it.
Yes, I mean, and that's part of whose vision, that's part of what sort of vision. Well, Descartes would say that, all right? Plato would say that, wouldn't he? Aristotle might not say that. You need to find the level of satisfaction that is what? Moderate, temperate, right?
Right, a happy who can.
All right. However, the contemplative man is the happiest, and the contemplative man is he who needs little. All right. Now we know, actually, Ryan and Dana know from another course that that those ideas are not purely accepted in the Enlightenment. Right? That there are already the conflicting ideas of materialism, and Diderot, another Enlightenment philosopher, right, was considered in many ways before his time. All right? So his materialism is what's picked up in the 1800s and really goes very far. All right? Yeah.
So we're saying that Hegel's saying that philosophy depends on the circumstances
Right.
of historical period. But he's also saying that there is an absolute idea.
Absolutely.
Well, that's
So we have a problem.
Indeed. That's the discrepancy I was
wait.
talking about yesterday. Go on.
Oh, I missed that.
those two things are contradictory then.
Uh-huh. Right. I mean, how are we supposed to reconcile? Because he spends a paragraph, you know, even on the same page saying that
Go on.
the idea isn't just temporal but transient. And
How do you figure to reconcile that?
is he talking about capital idea?
Yes.
So that's just like Plato's time.
Yeah.
So he's exactly like Plato.
No.
Well, then we're what do they do?
He thinks that Plato was caught up too much in the times.
But he necessarily
No,
did
he's
so.
not going to use that as a pure condemnation. He uses that as a condemnation for those around him who are not seeking to move forward, who are just stewing around, right? He doesn't use that as a condemnation of previous great thinkers.
Yeah, but it says Plato was conscious that there was, I mean, he gives Plato, what he does give Plato, though, is the fact that he was still a genius in proving the fact that the principle on which the distinctive character of his idea of the state turns is precisely the pivot on which the impending world revolution turned at the time.
Wait, so does the synthesis give you the absolute or the
The historic already there.
Want me to read that again?
I know, but
Yes,
this is
read
also-
that again, okay?
I'll start. Plato was conscious that there was breaking into that life in his own time a deeper principle which could appear in it directly only as a longing, still unsatisfied, and so only as something corruptive. To combat it, he must have sought aid from that very longing itself. But this aid had come from on high, and all that Plato could do was to seek it in the first place in a particular external form of that same Greek ethical life. But that means, he thought, to master this corruptive invader, and thereby he did fatal injury to this deeper impulse which underlay it, namely free, infinite personality. Still, his genius is proved by the fact that the principle on which the distinctive character of his idea of the state turns is precisely the pivot on which the impending world revolution turned at that time.
Good.
So history is dependent on one person?
What do you
No.
mean by free infinite personality?
Well, hold on a second. All right, yeah, well, it's a bizarre idea. But what he really talks about is, in a sense, a history of consciousness, all right? A history of an unfolding awareness of these infinites.
That's what Marx
All right?
too.
Yes, right.
I'm not
This is
quite
where Marx gets so excited about Hegel, all right, when he is a young Hegelian. Then he changes Hegel because his dialectic and his notion of progress becomes much more weighed down in materialism, all right, in the real stuff of existence, you know, and what he calls the relationships to the forces of production, right? What class you're in. So he gets really into into economics. He's an economist. He gets into the very real, concrete matters of our lives. But he doesn't do this till later. First, he latches on to Hegel, and that's what you've got. All right, that's what section 2 has. When he is discovering Hegel, and it's like for him, it's discovering religion. All right, it is discovering a method and a structure through which you look at the world.
Exactly what is Hegel's view on God? It doesn't seem to be very clear.
Well, you'd have to find it. This is interesting, this aid had to come from on high.
And he went into
Yeah, he talked
religious.
He talked about like something.
Well, can we wait a second to get to that, Billy? Because it will you'll have a clearer answer in a second.
Just
When
take
we
one
talk
step.
about, when we talk about history of consciousness, then that section on Plato is very interesting because what does he say? He tells us a couple of things about Plato. One, Plato's a genius. Why is Plato a genius?
Because he proved the fact that the principle on which the distinctive character
Because he anticipated
turns is precisely
He anticipated the need for a certain idea and provided it.
Right.
revolution, right?
All right. So he slotted himself into the historical flow of things and created a structure that would fit that. But it is bizarre because what's difficult for us to get a hold of is he's not saying Plato was an extraordinary individual to be taken as such, only as such. All right? History is not a history of extraordinary people having extraordinary thoughts, creating history. Hegel's genius, Plato's genius is what?
When he was able to interpret the history around him.
Good,
Yeah.
good. Impulse. He talks about impulse. I mean, it's almost this kind of intuitive stuff that those of you who know about romantic individualism, right?
If it's intuitive, he puts down his intuition completely.
Right.
Plato says, he says the that bad or good?
Oh, it's bad.
Right. Still, his genius is proved. Okay.
Okay,
So
you see, in other words-
he did this, but he was a genius. So,
Right.
but what was
Because
the
no
impulse?
one is perfect, all right? Because he's attached to his time. So you see, he's responding to something. So the impulse is what?
Free infinite personality, whatever that means.
Let's look at free and infinite personality, the translation of personality.
Wait, so would the pivot be
a little bit funky? It's hard for us to get up.
Would the pivot be the pivot on which the impending world revolution turns time? That's just he discovered the source of everything that was
Yeah,
going on.
it's not that he created the source,
He just-
all right?
he recognized
It's not,
it.
I mean, this is the big difference between this and an individualist. It's not that he created this. It's not that Plato,
He was
created the
kind of
need,
unearthed.
created the revolution, created the structure. It's that he recognized it
And respond.
and responded. But in his response, and this is the concept of the dialectic, all right? In his response, all right, he's responding to something. He was responding to Socrates' death, to the injustices around him, to the the nature, the crazy, messed up nature of the system, right? So he's responding, offering something else. But as a response, it is thus impure. All right? It's impure because it's attached to history, but we cannot expect anything else. All right? So
What
it
is
is
the
corrupted
world-
by. All right? Now,
What is this world revolution? I don't remember world revolution.
It's not
number
just
one.
like the turning, right, of the planet. He doesn't mean like a revolution, like a change. He just means the cyclic turnings of the.
no,
No,
Or
he
the
just
just
said
the
history
turning.
goes in spirals and you need like.
well, we haven't touched upon, and partially because it's hotly contested, because a lot of people think that Hegel's whole notion of the state, right? Pardon? State with a big S,
Well, that's
right?
what a lot of
Is,
stuff-
had to do with his sort of, appealing to the powers, official powers.
Oh.
However, it also has to do with the fact that Germany was in the process of trying to unify itself, right?
But he doesn't really go into the state of mind. He says
Well, he does go,
wants
the
to.
state is the biggest thing at the end of the philosophy of right.
But the thing at the beginning, so he doesn't want to go into specifics because that wasn't the role of philosophy, but give
Right.
them.
Right. And what he's doing,
Again.
pardon? No. He will try to avoid the specifics of the state. He will go into the whole section in the text on it. But he will smoke screen himself a little bit because he doesn't want to get censored to death. Right?
So it's not really belief, it's just that he wants to say that again.
Yes, and we're not really clear. A new text came out a couple of years ago, I think it was 15 years ago. A new translation of Hegel based on his earlier drafts, which is a completely different, and part of the reason I'm staying away from the sections, I haven't read the new translation, based on his earlier drafts, and suggests completely different things about the state. Now, in the philosophy of right as we have it, the state is sort of, he sees as the ultimate vehicle through which harmony and the sort of philosophical telos will be achieved. All right, that there needs some physical structure, and it will be given to us by the state. Okay. Now here, of course, he and Marx disagree violently because Marx talks about the withering away of the state once communism is in place. That the state will provide an intermediate structure,
That's almost
but
like
the
what
telos
Voltaire
of communism, which is, a millennium away at this point, all right, but the telos of communism is in fact having people live without an imposition, right, without that kind of structure.
Isn't that almost what like Voltaire wanted?
Yes.
Did Marx ever touch on it?
Yes, but, pardon?
I thought Voltaire wanted the king with the parliament. I thought he wanted an English
He
system.
wanted the king
Yeah,
to go away.
Yeah, but whispering, whispering. They
That's still
weren't really to impose upon individual lives, because everything that Voltaire tells us in Candide is that institutions, qua institutions, right, are corrupt. All right, institutions, as soon as
That's
they
why
get power
they take-
from people, impose that power upon.
What about the gray areas? He discusses like this gray area is wherever the problem with his argument is it's so black and white. And he said in relation to gray areas in philosophy, he says that he sort of says something that I don't really understand. He says philosophy's gray and gray cannot be rejuvenated but only understood. But that's,
I thought
what
that
does he
was
mean
talking
by
about
that?
history.
Rejuvenating the gray area. Because, is he just saying that you can understand the gray area but change it into an either black or white area?
That's sort of, there's something, if we move from go on.
That's all I had to say.
Well,
I didn't hear it.
it was just here.
Isn't that where the synthesis to decide what to do? Dana, don't me. In the gray area?
No, but isn't gray the antithesis of black and white? Or would
No,
that just be
not
the
It's the place that's left unresolved.
I mean, the synthesis is what
All
I
right.
mean, yeah.
It's the place that's left unresolved. So we've got Plato, right? Plato moves us, and his movement, all right, is generated by, provoked by a basic impulse. All right? This impulse is tied to what? Tied to two things.
Will.
All right. Yes. And that has to do with this. What?
Well, people's, there's the natural will and there's the rational will, right?
Yeah.
The two wills. And the natural will feels a tug in its everyday natural surroundings, and the rational will feels a tug in its whole, in the whole scheme of things, in sort of national scheme of things. So the body gets, the mind gets tugged in two ways, and it's not always sure what to do. And so the geniuses are the ones who can overcome their natural will and use their rational will to affect history in the proper way. Or what?
To respond to history.
All right.
More, okay?
No, I don't understand the difference between natural and
All right. Well, my natural will is to get up out of this class and go eat lunch because I'm really hungry. But my rational will is telling me that I really ought to stay here and learn something because I'm surprised that from reading this I actually understand any of it. The element helps. Anyway, but so my rational will is telling me to stay here, my natural will is telling me to go eat. But staying here, I might have a chance to affect history. And if I just go eat lunch, I'm just feeding my face.
It's like dying, so that's-
Yeah, but that can become dangerous though when you're rationalizing like that. Because me and Billy got in a conversation like that. Like the fox
Me
and
and
the
Billy
grapes.
did.
The fox and the grapes. He wanted the grapes.
Sour
But
grapes.
realized he couldn't reach them and rationalized that the grapes were sour.
So that it made perfect sense in his mind.
Exactly. It's
Okay.
making up, it's almost like for your own human faults, you're rationalizing.
I mean, like when you don't get into a college, it wasn't
Yeah.
Yeah, but wait, that's a true perversion of Hegel.
Yeah,
I'm taking that to be
I
Hegel.
know.
Now,
But it's easily converted.
now. Julie Beck, is that you? Is that Latimer?
No one else has made anything after.
If he told it, he doesn't really warn people not to convert to him.
We're looking at her, God and Mother Jessica sitting here in the classroom talking. And Jim will be talking with you too.
Amy Sherman, Eliza Jameson.
The middle school. Please report.